Hey everyone, Thordan Smash here, out enjoying another day on the snowboard. But today we're going to talk all about Titanfall 3 and why it's probably not coming, and even if it does come, why it won't really be, Titanfall 3. We're going to go over all of that. We're also going to go ahead and give out an R301 Mythic skin. All you got to do is like, comment, subscribe. You guys know the drill. Without further ado, let's jump into today's topic.
So to understand the story of Titanfall, you have to really get a good look at the developers Respawn and what they were originally founded from, which was actually Infinity Ward, which was a video game developer you may know as the creators of the Call of Duty franchise. This is a studio that was actually founded by Vince Zampella, Grant Collier, and Jason West, who before working on the Call of Duty series did Medal of Honor. However, in early 2009, co-founder Collier actually left the company to join Activision, which was the parent company, and in 2010, West and Zampella were fired by Activision for breaches of contract and insubordination. Following this, they founded the game studio Respawn Entertainment, which we all know for the amazing Titanfall and Apex Legends series. Of course, starting a video game studio is never easy, and West and Zampella definitely needed funding to get this underway, and so they went and reached out to EA with their Partners program. However, West and Zampella were very adamant about the fact that they would retain all rights to the intellectual property produced by them in the future. However, later on in this video, you'll understand that may not have worked out the way they planned to. Shortly after receiving funding from EA, it was revealed at E3 in 2011 that EA and Respawn would be producing a sci-fi orientated shooter that would compete with things like Gears and Halo, which were the juggernauts of that genre at the time. There was a team of about 65 people that were working on this game, and what they decided to make the focus on was player mobility, survivability, and the merging of cinematic design with fast-paced action. It would be very hard to argue that this game did not hit those goals. It would release on Xbox One and Windows PC in North America on March 11th, followed shortly by Europe and Australia. And when it did debut, it received incredibly favorable reviews. It won over 60 awards. It was one of the best multiplayer games people have played since Halo and Call of Duty. It featured unique things like the smart pistol. It had that movement that the developers worked so hard to make. Overall, the multiplayer was an incredibly amazing part of the game, but it did lack something that a lot of people weren't fans of and that isn't brought up enough, and that's the fact that it really didn't have a campaign, so to speak. There was a slight tutorial in the game, and in the loading screens of the multiplayer, they would kind of give you the campaign, which if this was a multiplayer only game and it was a free-to-play like we see a lot in the market nowadays, it wouldn't be an issue. But the fact that it was sold for $60 and was really only multiplayer left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth, and sales were negatively impacted by the fact that people simply at the time weren't willing to shell out $60 for a multiplayer only experience. It's really important to remember that at this time there was not a Fortnite free-to-play battle royale. There wasn't PUBG, which came out as a multiplayer only game for $30. There was obviously no Apex Legends, so a free-to-play multiplayer game really wasn't the norm in this system. But at the same time, players weren't willing to actually buy a full-priced game for no campaign. But just a few months after the release of Titanfall, the founder Vince Zampella, along with producer Drew McCoy and others, decided to return for the sequel, which would have a 2-year development cycle, which would once again be published by Electronic Arts and had approved the funding and the marketing support of this. The game would be officially announced on March 12, 2015, and it would be coming to the PlayStation 4, unlike the original Titanfall, which was an Xbox exclusive. At the EA Play, the publisher Electronic Arts would announce that Titanfall 2 would be releasing worldwide on October 28th, 2016. There was only one slight problem. They decided to release this between one of their other studios' own titles, which was a huge juggernaut at the time, which was DICE's Battlefield 1, and then also Activision's futuristic Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, which at the time, Call of Duty was arguably the biggest FPS on the market. And while those two franchises are amazing within their own right, I don't think anyone could have expected how great Titanfall 2 would be. Everything that made the original Titanfall great with the multiplayer was there in Titanfall 2 and actually expanded on, and the maps were a ton of fun to play. The mechs were absolutely phenomenal and could not only compete with the Battlefield and Call of Duty franchise, but actually surpass them in that component. And the one true negative of the original Titanfall game, which was the campaign we covered, was completely made up here. In my personal opinion, Titanfall 2 goes up there with Halo Combat Evolved as one of the greatest FPS campaigns that I have personally ever played, and revolutionized what I expect from games in this genre going forward. The story story of the pilot Cooper and his Titan BT fighting in the frontier wars against the IMC militia was absolutely fantastic. Not only that story was great, but the gameplay mechanics as well, being able to phase in and out of time. There was so many unique concepts that were just thrown into this campaign. I can't do it in one video, but Call of Duty and Battlefield 1 really can't even compete with this. But the sad fact of life is that no matter how phenomenal a game, no matter how many diehard supporters there are of it, the masses most of the time will win out. I mean, people see the name Call of Duty or Battlefield, they're just gonna pick that up off of instinct and past brand name recognition. So it really shouldn't have come as a surprise to anyone at EA that Titanfall 2 did not live up to sales expectations. They truly set this game out to die, regardless of how phenomenal it may be. If they had not set it out to die, Titanfall could truly actually be the #1 game on the market right now, but unfortunately that just isn't what happened on that side of history. Instead of beginning work on a Titanfall 3, developers would begin toying around with the idea of creating a battle royale that would go into the emerging market, which had games such as PUBG and Fortnite. And after a few years of that same Respawn development team that had worked on Titanfall, they were ready to release a brand new free-to-play battle royale that was a complete surprise drop, and its name was Apex Legends. Apex Legends would end up becoming one of the best battle royales available, competing directly one-on-one with Fortnite and actually being one of EA's most profitable games, which generated a large amount of revenue for their publisher. They were able to take those functions they put into the heart and soul of Titanfall with mobility and survivability as the main emphasis, and truly make a wonderful battle royale that was set within the mythos of the Titanfall universe, running on the same source engine. And as phenomenal as Apex Legends is, a lot of people at the time though were wondering, well, now that this game did so well, obviously EA must see that Respawn knows what they are doing. They can make great games. When are we getting Titanfall 3 so we can see the next story of that? Well, despite many sayings from Respawn and Apex Legends on Twitter saying that Titanfall was the very core of their DNA, which in essence it should be, as it is the game that this company was actually founded on, we never got any official release dates for a Titanfall 3. We never got any news about anything in development, and slowly but surely Titanfall and Titanfall 2 became a victim of DDoS attacks, servers constantly going online, an almost unplayable game. Sorry, let me correct myself, it became literally unplayable, so bad that hackers actually took down Apex Legends on July 4th of just last year, putting out a message on the main screen saying save Titanfall 2. Players and fans were so upset at the fact that this franchise was completely put in the dustbin for a free-to-play game that they decided to take that free-to-play game down. Yet still nothing was said by Respawn or EA about a future Titanfall game. And this is where it truly becomes a sad tale, because in November of 2021, after Battlefield 2042 spectacularly burned and failed, EA said, hey, Vincent Pella, founder of Respawn, can you move over to DICE and try to manage that situation? It's a truly ironic situation that EA put up Respawn against DICE's Battlefield to kill off Titanfall, but it completely backfired to the point where now Respawn was in charge of actually saving the failing DICE and Battlefield franchise. And so the co-founder and very spirit of what made Respawn left. This was followed up by a ton of other departures from Respawn, such as Jason McCord and Drew McCoy, both original producers and founders of the Titanfall games and Respawn, moving on to work at different studios. One of them actually just said, hey, I don't want to work for EA really. I mean, he actually kind of technically said, I don't have another job, but yeah, he basically said he didn't want to work for EA. The entire Respawn team has pretty much completely departed, and currently Respawn has a ton of vacancies within their own studio. Yet EA at the same time has decided to splinter this franchise off after the success of Jedi Fallen Order, which really just shows to me that the original Respawn team was phenomenal and could make great games no matter what. But regardless of that, they have splintered the team into about 4 or 5 different games, none of which are a Titanfall 3. But I'm actually going to be a little honest here, and it might actually hurt some feelings. I'm glad they're not working on a Titanfall 3, because if they did, this would not be the studio and the team that designed the originals. No one there is left. That vision, that idea, those core mechanics that were designed by this team would be non-existent in a Titanfall 3. It would just be a cash grab by EA to try to grab in on the franchise after Apex Legends. So this truly is the rise and the fall of the Titanfall franchise, which was no fault of Respawn, but rather a greedy publisher who didn't actually know how to manage the gold that they got their hands on. And I'm sorry to say that we never actually truly will see a Titanfall 3, because even if EA decides to push and publish one, it's just going to be a shell that's truly empty of what actually made this.
Let me know down below, what do you guys think about a Titanfall 3? Do you think it would actually be good if it ever came to the game, or are you glad that they aren't going to be making one in the near future? Also, don't forget to check out this video right here by my editor Novell, who does amazing Apex Legends content. And until next time, everyone, keep slaying the islands. See you out there.